Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in once again. This is Tom from Regal Robot, here to have another chat with a friend of mine and somebody who is an absolute legend in the special effects world, Mr. Phil Tippett. We were going to do a video chat, but due to some technical difficulties, we're going to go with just audio. I'll apologize in advance for any of the audio quality. It seems we are both better at sculpting monsters than making technology work. But either way, it's a fun chat. I hope you enjoy it. We previously got to talk with Phil along with John Berg and Dennis Murin a while back. I'll put the link to that in the video description. You should definitely check that out. We go really far into their beginnings and working at Cascade with people who were their mentors and things like that. For this chat, we're going to talk more about things like the maquettes that are behind me and a lot of the designs and work that Phil did for Return of the Jedi. So thanks for giving this a look, and I hope you enjoy. You seem to be everywhere right now. Every time I go online, when I go on my Amazon Prime, when I'm looking at books, there's Mad Dreams and Monsters movie, the Mad Dreams and Monsters book, Mad God film, new studio ventures in Canada. Am I missing anything?
God, I don't know. I mean, there's so many things going on. I just kind of wait for people to tell me what I need to do.
They just push you in the right direction?
Yeah, I got interviews with Japan this afternoon. It's opening in Japan soon.
Oh, that's outstanding.
Oh, God.
Yeah, so aside from the promotional side of it, the making of the stuff side of it, would you consider yourself one of these people, like, if no one paid you, you'd just be doing the same thing?
Back in the day, as a hobby, but I don't know what else I would have done, probably sell pizzas or shoes.
There's nothing wrong with pizza. I'm from New York, so I'm totally all right with that. But yeah, it's a little hard to picture you, at a shoe store. I don't know.
No, I was very lucky.
Yeah.
It was just, nobody else was doing that stuff. And so it was very, I didn't worry about work at all. I would just wait when a gig was over. I'd just wait, for the phone to ring. And I just got used to and preferred doing that when I was working in commercials because I could work and take a bunch of time off and then diddle around with my own stuff and wait for the phone to ring. And then after Star Wars, it was pretty much the same thing. It was just like, okay. Well, I mean, it was like, yeah. After Star Wars, whatever it was, a couple of years or whatever, I was doing commercials. And then after Empire, it was just everything was back to back. It was Dragon Slayer and Jedi. And then I took a break and made Prehistoric Beasts, and then whatever happened next.
Right, yeah. Somewhere RoboCop happened, it's just... Yeah, it feels like it's been pretty nonstop for you since then.
Yeah, really.
Which is, you called it lucky. I think, obviously there's a degree of the luck you made yourself with this stuff, but certainly in this industry, not everybody gets that. So that's definitely a testament.
Be in the right place in the right time and work with a bunch of 800-pound gorilla directors. So, yeah. But again, it was because hardly anybody was doing this stuff, and nobody really knew how to get through pre-production, production, and post-production.
Yeah,
that's a skill that you learn over time.
One of the things that jumped out at me in the so if anybody has Amazon Prime, they should immediately go and look at the Mad Dreams and Monsters documentary movie, which was just outstanding. Did you guys, was that self-produced or was that somebody else that came in and did that?
No, it was on Alexander Poncet and Gilles Pinceau. They're French on their ticket. And so they would come for a number of years and stay at my house. And the first time they came, they were going to just look for whatever I had. And I told them there's a bunch of boxes up in the attic with cobwebs and dust. I have no idea what's in them. But, I didn't throw anything away, ever. And so, there's everything up there. Polaroid, production reports, and notes on how I made, walkers and tauntauns moves, and, and all that stuff's in that giant book.
I love, I know when we were doing the Hollow Chest, you pulled out the scrapbook or sent us photos from the scrapbook at some point. And it was extremely helpful on some of the stuff for us, things that Lucasfilm doesn't even have. What drives that? Is it just, what drives the not throwing anything out? Is that, where does that come from for you?
Well, I just throw things in boxes and put them up in the attic. And, but, a lot of artists do that.
Yeah.
They just keep everything for no good reason.
Right.
And then, you just totally forget about it.
Well, because you're immediately on to the next gig, you're on to the next creation, you're figuring out how to make the next thing that you're going to put in a box and throw in the attic.
Yeah.
In your, the cottage, what do you call that space? You have, so for anybody that hasn't seen, there's, you got like the sort of cottage behind the house there that's your, like, is that, I guess nowadays people would call it a man cave? I don't even know. Like, what's...
No, it's just the cottage. And during Mad God, I used it to, kind of do experiments on the weekends if I wasn't shooting. And then a strange thing happened. When Mad God premiered at Carno, around that time, I just lost interest in making anything with my hands anymore. And so I turned the cottage into a painting studio for Jules, my wife. And now I just have like a little garret, and I, kind of changed my attack, to writing material. So, I've been doing that for like 20 years, and again, it's an accumulated skill, So I'm strong with ideas, but it just takes me a long time to get what it takes to write. Not that it's any good, but
writing is its own very unique creative outlet, to at least to the other stuff. Do you still? I know you had said something in the thing that really jumped out at me. They asked you, if all the stuff in the room on the walls and the shelves and everything, all the artifacts you had collected were for inspiration, and you said it was more like ambience and things talk to you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you feel that with writing as well? Just like being absorbed in that sort of space, those things just seep into you and work their way out through your fingers as you go?
I find the process very easy. I like kind of channeling Stephen King because I can visualize things, and I just see the movie in my mind. And it's just a matter of getting behind the mule and doing it.
Right.
Currently, I wrote everything out in words, so now I've got to translate that back into final draft. So that's a slog.
Right. Yeah. When it comes to, you talk about being able to see this stuff, and that's, it's almost like you've got to just tune your own brain into letting it tell that story, and trying to set that other part of yourself aside to watch it almost, and not intentionally steer it.
It's just like anything else with me, if I'm designing a creature, it's just like, Could be this, it could be that. Nothing's precious, and you just do it.
Yeah.
There's, pretty much what I do is like, I just follow the vision. I can just see things in my mind and then just do it. It's the equivalent of, if you look at interviews with Bach and Beethoven and Mozart and ask how they do their music, they just say they just transcribe it,
Right.
And it's literally that.
Yeah, you don't know. Yeah, it's just there. You're just, putting it out, just letting it free.
The other thing that happened when I finished Mad God was during that whole process, I dreamt prolifically, and I would get up and just go down. I could write and when Mad God finished, I stopped dreaming.
Oh, wow.
And but I found it very well. It was also, let's see, who did Neil Gaiman. I was just reading an article with him about the Sandman, and same thing happened to him. He just dreamt, prolifically while he was doing the Sandman, and when he was done, it stopped.
Do you think that's just that your brain was going because it knew it was working on something, and it was just working this stuff out for you while you were sleeping, and then once you knew it was done, it was like, I could take a break?
I didn't use anything really, verbatim from the dreams. They were just normal, weird dreams. But what I did find was after I'd been doing it for a couple of months and would go back in, I found that there was actually a structure lurking in the dreams. And there would be, in like 3 parts, there would be, beginning, middle, and end. And the beginning would pose a problem. The middle was kind of like the unconscious of the unconscious, processing it.
Right.
And at the end, it was, probably 50% of the time a resolution.
Wow.
Which certainly indicates to me that, storytelling is, innate in our DNA.
Right. Yeah, dreaming in 3 acts. That's excellent.
Well, yeah.
When you're talking about seeing stuff, and you started to drift into designing a creature, and I think that's actually perfect for some of the stuff we want to talk about. But I know from when I sculpt stuff, there are times where I go in and I have a really clear picture in my mind of what I want this thing to be. Other times I'll have a little bit of a thing, and then sometimes I just start and the clay just sort of takes you somewhere. Do you have all 3 of those? Do you always have something in mind when you start? How does it usually flow for you?
Well, it depends on what I'm doing. It's like, George wanted what they were calling it at the time, a snow lizard, for the Tauntaun. And so like, oh, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard of. And so I did, a couple of afternoons, I did a bunch of, it could be this, it could be that, I wasn't tied to anything.
Right.
And, gave George a lot to, choose from as a direction, which he really appreciated. And then when, and then I made a maquette of the Tauntaun, which I could restore. So
yeah, I know. They were actually up at the archives again just recently doing more scanning on some of those old maquettes. Not that Tauntaun, but a bunch more of the Jedi maquettes. It's been a fascinating process. I actually have to thank you. Between you and Ken and Kirk and even Judy and Tom Santamon and Dave Carson, like everybody has really pitched into figuring out who sculpted each of these things.
Right.
And it's been like this great little archaeological project to sink my teeth into, figuring out, where did all of these come from? On those tauntauns. So you're talking about the first sort of draft of what we came to know as the final tauntaun, sort of a little smaller than the final draft, which you did, which we offer the replica of.
Very tiny. It's just a sketch.
Yeah.
And so George saw that and just said, "Oh, yeah." And that's what subsequently I found, that George was much more inclined to pretty much immediately go for a maquette. The 2D stuff that, Ralph and Joe and Nilo would do, that whole thing kind of turns into what about this tail and that tail? And, but with the maquette, George, could see it,
Yeah.
there. And I've got, to some degree, autism, so I can see things in my mind, and, turn them around, and, so I can kind of see them volumetrically sometimes. I mean, the day job, when I'm supposed to do, like, a dragon, if there's something in the script, then that's a target. And then other things like, Jabba the Hutt, we were all kind of at a stalemate. And then somehow I came up with the design, and it's like you said, you just start.
Yeah.
And it takes you, you ride the wild elephant.
Right.
The elephant takes you where it wants to go.
Yeah.
It really does happen too. It's and it's sometimes I liken it to playing music. I play guitar forever, and I feel like there's times where you play the guitar, and then there's times where the guitar just sort of plays, and you're along for the ride. And that's it. You get into the right creative space, you get started, and you're emotionally set for it and available to it, and then it's just you put your hands in it, and it sort of tells you where it wants to go.
I call it zone.
For sure. Yeah. Do you think so? On to get specific to the tauntaun, so some of those early sketches you did before we're talking the full body, these 4 busts that we've got going. When you're art directing a project or something, you ask someone for 4 looks on something, and you get 4 of basically the same thing they've already shown you. Whereas these are 4 really drastically different things. Is there a discipline to forcing yourself to go that broad, to get outside of the box like that?
Or
no, it's literally, I'm not committed to anything. It could be this, it could be that.
Right.
You just pull these things out of your ass, and let the boss figure out which turd he wants.
I need to make a bumper sticker of that. Is there on some of these, I've noticed that they're sculpted asymmetrically as well. Like there's a couple of these that have 2 different faces if you look at them on the left and the right. Is that a trick you've done a lot?
Yeah, well, it's economizing.
Yeah.
It's just giving, the director, more choices. And I always, of course, like many people, did, really push the asymmetry of the face. And
it seems like for you, I think you said earlier, nothing's precious when you're going. And I think maybe the ability to do that, to be able to say that and commit to it, leads to a more organic, asymmetrical end result.
It's kind of like being a kid and playing, with your army man, so it's like, it's fun, what will I see next? What will I transcribe from God,
The mad God, as it were. You talked about George being, it almost sounds like you're manipulating him with the maquettes. You found him quicker to approve stuff if it was a maquette versus a sketch. For yourself, do you find yourself gravitating towards three-dimensional concept work in terms of creating it? Do you prefer that over sketching stuff just in general?
I'm a far better sculptor designer than I am, two-dimensional. I kind of, in terms of drawing, I kind of got to this point where that was all I needed to do for what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And, some of the drawings, and I have hundreds upon hundreds of drawings, that I've saved.
Mm-hmm.
And just going back even to like when I was like 5 years old,
Oh, wow.
they were like, or whatever, 6, 8. No, these are like really primitive, and there would be like spaceships and deep sea divers and knights and a lot of red blood.
Naturally.
Giant squids were a big thing for me.
Oh, yeah.
And so I saved all that stuff. I don't know how many times I've moved in my life, but somehow I kept this stuff. And it's currently being archived at Tippett Studio. So, and it's going to take about a year to do it because there's so much stuff.
That's amazing. I bet people would love to see, some of the early bloody Phil Tippett giant squid art.
Yeah, once we get it archived, I would like to, do a book that's just a picture book, with no dialogue. So I'll whenever we get our shit together, I'll see if Alexander and Jills want to collaborate on something.
That's fun, man. When you're doing maquette work for a movie, do you ever get attached to a particular design? Or, let's say you present 5 looks to a director and you have the one you really want to get it, but the director picks a different one. Does that stay with you afterwards, or is it just, nope, that's not what he wants, all right, moving on?
No, I mean, I think Java was a good, example. Was the first one I did was, as George said, looked too much like Ming the Merciless.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it had like 4 arms and sat in a chair.
Yeah.
It would have been a hell of a thing.
Yeah.
And then the other one I did was closer in configuration to Java, but it had like a big scarred up face that ooze was coming out of. And George goes, "That's too horrible." and we all, Joe and Ralph and Nilo and I, had hit a wall. And so I asked George if there was an actor that he would cast for this. And he said Sidney Greenstreet. And that's what illuminated my mind.
Mm.
It was like, okay, now I have the character. Now I can just let go and find the character in the clay.
Right. And then the creatureness of him just oozes out of that.
Yeah. And then, the maquettes for George were, he could hold them in his hand. He could turn them. He could see angles.
Mm.
So as a filmmaker, seeing a thing, in light,
mm-hmm.
as opposed to the, abstraction of a 2D image.
Right. And that final Jabba maquette has such great attitude. Just his pose, the sense of weight of it all, the hands crossed on his belly, resting on the belly, and just there's a ton of attitude that comes through that I guess you could get in a 2D picture, but it really does feel like, in 3D, you're better showcasing all those aspects of it.
Yeah, I like, what I came up with better than what was in the movie. Because it was like, George ended up, keeping the character, but kind of turned it into a frog, and it was green the ability to, and I don't know. I mean, at that point, I had let the thing go and went over to Stewart.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very, very likely that a lot of the decisions that they had made at that time were very practical.
I'm sure. Yeah.
It does.
I thought of Java as a human, not a creature, but it was like, what are they called in Dune? Like the spice merchants,
Right?
The people, or a lot of Jack Vance's characters, the writer are humans that just had evolved away from us,
It's funny, I think, well, even you go back to the first Star Wars film, and they shot it with a human as Jabba, and there's always some back and forth of if George really intended for that to have stop motion over top of it someday or something like that.
We talked about it,
Yeah.
But it was just, a lot of that stuff had to be cut. He just didn't have the money, or the time to do it.
It didn't feel like it was shot for, matting something into it. It felt like there were a lot of choices in how they shot it that would have been really challenging back then, let alone now.
I don't know that the technology was such. I mean, it was, but it would have been a big deal to do that. I think there was a version of, or I just stuck it on, that Jabba had a fez.
Oh, is that something that maybe Ken Ralston did for a T-shirt or something? Because that sounds familiar, like Jabba with a fez on.
I don't recall. I see it in my mind's eye.
Yeah.
That maybe I didn't even, I had it as an attachment.
Right.
You can have it with the fez, or you can have it without a fez.
Going into some of the other ones, we've talked about the sort of first draft mini Tauntaun. We have your final draft of the Tauntaun, which you luckily had kept the molds. Thanks for being a hoarder. And so that we've been offering folks. We still have I think it's about 80% sold through. So maybe there's under 50 of them left. If anybody who's listening is interested, they can go to regalrobot.com and go buy one. And it's got Phil's signature, and it's right out of the original mold, and really is one of my favorite sculpts. There's something. I'm turning and looking because I've got one over my shoulder here, and it's I don't know why, and I remember we were at your place restoring the Dragon Slayer puppet. Me and Pat were over there, and I just saw it up in the rafters, just a casting, and it's like when you said you still had the mold, it really kind of blew my mind, actually.
Yeah, well, once I had the mold, that was just to sign off, and that particular one, had a really different kind of, it was more like a warthog ant,
Yes.
And I thought that would be fun, but George and Kirshner felt that it should have a tail, so I couldn't disagree. I mean, it's just I generally would go for weird,
right,
and then George would want to make things more conventional,
right.
So I mean that happened a lot, and he had a problem with a lot of the stuff that I did, which was the faces were unclear. And that's something, I mean, I would always adjust to whatever he wanted. I mean, the initial Howard the Duck creature was very H.P. Lovecraft, kind of a buggy thing. And George just said, hey, make something, with eyes that you can see. And, and Yeah, so I'll go like, okay,
Right.
and do that.
I feel like the final on that Howard the Duck creature is still pretty out there.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Actually, that's one of the ones I was most happy with. Just because of that reason.
yeah.
Or what it was like, do what you want.
It was, yeah. I mean, it definitely, and it's maybe scarier because it's a bit abstract. It doesn't. You don't know what part of it could hurt you. It's just sort of all over the place.
Yeah, that was our intention with Starship Troopers.
Mm.
Particularly the first thing we see with the arachnid
Yeah.
soldiers. You really wanted to have that nightmare feeling,
Yeah.
where at first you don't. I thought they kind of gave it away too early when it killed the cow.
Mm.
But in those scenes where they first see the bugs amassing, that was I think it was Klein Thu that you're it's at night and they're dark and you just go, and there's a lot of them. You just go like, what the fuck? And it's the same kind of thing that Geiger had in the neighborhood. It was just like your mind takes a bit to put all the pieces together, and so your unconscious is like kind of bubbling out
Right.
there,
Yeah.
which is where you want it, for a nightmare image.
Yeah. Yeah. Let people make it even worse in their minds.
Yeah.
Which, just anyway, a field full of giant arachnids sounds pretty terrifying to me just in the first place. I don't do well with spiders.
Troopers, when we were shooting that stuff at night, I walked out to, take a pee. And I was standing there peeing. And all of a sudden, this black thing about 3 feet high comes towards me. I mean, it's coming at me, and it's just like I'm running away, trying to stop peeing and put my dick back in my pants to run away. And I got some distance on the thing, and what it was like a big black garbage bag filled up with wind.
Right.
And the wind was gently blowing it in my direction. And it's that effect, where it's just like, that was actually more successful, because it was really immediate and real, it struck these primal chords in me.
Right.
And that's what I generally aspired to. But, those personal kinds of effects, are far more compelling.
That is genuinely terrifying, especially in that scenario. It's like you're at your most vulnerable.
You could kind of hear it as the wind was gently blowing it. It's not this rustling kind of sound that was attached to it, which made it worse.
I feel like that's just an amazing jump scare for a movie. If you're next time you sit down to write, there's your your misdirect jump scare, and then the guy turns around after he's all zipped up and then gets eaten by the real monster.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's your movie.
All right. I'll give you credit. We also have the Max Rebo you did, which was also like a lot of these scanned off the real prop in the archives, and there's I think that edition is also about 75% sold through if anybody is looking for one of those. And what's neat about him is he's he did vary a little bit from the final, but it's not dramatic other than some of the body positioning that I think is probably just necessitated by the fact that a human being is in the final costume.
Oh yeah, yeah. You just have to. I mean, I just let go when I make it like that. But then it's like what Stewart had to do with Jabba. Then you have to, accommodate it to
Yeah.
be a food. One of the things that happened, we had to make a video to send to England
Mhm.
of Joe Johnston called it Red Ball Jet
Mhm.
after the finish shoot, and so I built the costumes, and it was late in the day, and nobody was around, so I had to get in the suit. Well, I wanted to get in the suit, and I wanted to break it,
Mhm.
and then adjust from there. And so George had picked Rick James Superfleet as the the music to perform to.
Mhm.
And so I was there doing my Max Rebo thing, and Jules comes in. We had one car at that time, and she came to pick me up and asked Patty Blau, the producer, where's Phil? And she said, he's in the costume. And Jules says, that's impossible. The guy has no sense of rhythm, and he can't dance. And then I took the suit off, and it was like, holy. And it's like that's why you make a costume, and it goes back to like the shamanic kinds of things, or the American Indians. You become this character, and so you can inhabit the mind of that character.
Mhm.
And so then I could have rhythm, and make the thing fun. And then I take it off and I turn back into myself.
And you got two left feet.
Yeah.
Carol Spinney, who played Big Bird, and I got my first start in the business. My first internship was on Sesame Street, and he would always say that he couldn't dance either, but Big Bird could.
Yes.
And
Exactly.
so
There it is. um, the Bib Fortuna concept maquette, you're sort of very pink, and I feel like there's a little bit of Elephant Man in him.
Well, that's what George asked for.
Ah,
He said he wanted something like the Elephant Man.
nice. Well, yeah, because it definitely has a bit of that vibe, and that's one that we've. I think we already did the signing with you for the plaques, and those will be coming out early next year probably. But it's an interesting transition from that to the final. It's like he got a little nicer looking in the final. I mean, maybe it's just down to the actor.
I think they did their adjustments that they made, I think, were the right ones.
Mm.
I think making him, Caucasian color.
Yeah.
I think mine was like blues and grays in it or something like that. And then the addition of those teeth in the eyes, I thought were brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And when that guy was on the set and would look at you, it was really creepy.
It's a really effective makeup.
Yeah.
And not easy to get. Like anybody who has ever done this stuff can tell you, big long tubes and tails and things like that are not easy.
No, and who was the English sculptor? Was it Nick?
It was Nick Dudman who did that.
Yes.
Yeah, no, he was really terrific.
Yeah. Obviously, we did the Rancor puppet scale with you. Thank you. And we've since gone and seen and scanned the maquette version too, and it really kind of, I feel like that's another one kind of similar to Max. There's not a lot of air between the concept and the final on that Rancor. Like, you really dialed that thing in at the maquette scale.
Yeah. Well, I generally start with the concept, that's very vague and abstract, like the Howard the Duck monster. I wanted to make something that was like something you wouldn't want to find in your toilet. And then Rancor was a cross between a bear and a potato.
Right.
And so George, he was very adamant. He wanted to make, as he called it, the best Godzilla suit ever. And so we attempted to do that, but the design was not, it was really for a stop motion puppet, but we had run out of time because we had spent so much time trying to make this thing as a man in a suit. And, at that point, George said, "Okay, do whatever you want to do." And so, it was designed as a stop motion puppet, but we had eaten up so much time that Dennis came up with a, idea to shoot as a high-speed puppet, which was a very brilliant idea.
Yeah, it was one of those things I remember, the first time I saw one of the behind-the-scenes shots, and you're there, little 18-inch puppet, wiggling him around like Kermit the Frog, and I'm like, how did that happen? Like, that really blew my mind as a kid, that sense of scale came out of that thing. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, we would do, sometimes we would do up to 60 takes.
Oh my gosh.
And, like you were saying earlier, like some sculptors, would, come up with a design and then, design half a dozen other things that look like the first design, only, a bit different. And so it's kind of that way with doing that kind of performance is, number one, at high speed, you don't know what you're going to get.
Right.
And so it was the antithesis of stop motion, where you just had to, if you're shooting, 90 frames a second, you just have to go bang, 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 bang. And you're not quite sure if you're hitting your marks, you just, and so you do it over and over again. But what happens as you start doing that many takes, there's not much you can do. And so you really resort to, muscle memory. And it's all happening so fast that you just hope you'll catch lightning in a bottle. So we show up to dailies. And George finally got wise to us. And, we were, running the stuff. And then we got up to 10, 20 takes. And he said, "How many takes are there?" And it was like 60. He says, "Okay, just pick out the 5 or 6, you like the most, and send them over to Dwayne, and, we'll choose them."
Nice. Yeah, that's kind of a lot to dig through, and I, this is not in any kind of this pre-digital era. It's not like you could have 60 little clips on a desktop and move them around or anything. Like, you've got to watch these in order and try and remember, oh, wait, was number 7 any better than number 46? Rewind.
Yeah, that was it.
Man.
But it was actually pretty easy. Well, no, it was actually like splitting hairs.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Might be, one where his slobber wasn't quite right. The eye line was wrong, or, didn't look like he was walking. There was something, practical in his design where his legs were very short.
Yeah.
And I needed to do that because I was operating the head, and I had a black velvet, glove on that would cover up my forearm.
I personally, I come at sculpting as mostly a mask making guy, so I'm used to lots of clay at a time and very big stuff. You seem to be able to get really amazing detail on small scale. Do you have a preference between small and large scale sculpting?
Yeah, small stuff is just concepts, and I don't want to waste a lot of time,
Right.
Doing stuff that's going to be rejected.
Yeah.
And then in the case of Rancor, then it gets sculpted, and then you go in and the form is, almost identical. Then you can really get into the weeds with all the other detail.
Right. It's like you're looking at it in high def for the first time.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I got away with. It was right on the borderline of what George didn't like, which was a face that initially was very abstract, and you kind of go, "What the fuck?" and then it because he always wanted to see the eyes, and so we went to great lengths to put in, like fiber optic cables, red eyes, and it just looked like shit. And so what I came up with was I got super bright ball bearings, and then I got a black Sharpie and covered those up and popped them in. And then Dennis lit it such that the Sharpie was very thin, and you could see through to the metal, and so that gave us little pinpoints of light, and not these big white rolling around things.
Right.
Anyhow, and so
I love solutions like that. It's a metal ball bearing and a Sharpie, but the glint that it gets, and there's so many moments in that scene where it just, like you said, it catches the light just the right way.
Yeah, well, that was Dennis, and it was kind of tricky to get, because it was a relatively small set, and to get all that stuff in there, a bounce card, with the, because you didn't want to have a real light, but then you have to put the bounce card so it'll catch the light, and then a light coming from another direction that hits the bounce card. So it's like got pretty tight and pretty warm in there. We were shooting with 5Ks.
Oh gosh.
And just to get the depth of field.
Right.
And it got pretty warm in there.
No joke. Was Jedi your first head of department role at that point, or at least at that scale?
There was so much to do, and George trusted me. There was no head of animation. When we were doing Empire, it was just John and me.
Right.
And then George deputized me to be the creature shop guy because he trusted me, like my designs. And I was told like Howard Koch. No, it wasn't Howard Koch. Howard was the producer on that.
Kazanjian.
Why don't you hire Rick Baker, Rob Bottin? Because they know how to do this stuff. I'm more a miniature guy, and George didn't want to do that. He liked my kind of out there designs, and he felt that those guys would hit it on the nose rather than just make a big stew out of whatever you had, and who knows what it was going to turn out like.
Well, and I mean, I'm looking through, so I had sent you a sort of PDF that was, because like I said, we've been going through and identifying these. When you say George liked your designs, you're not joking because I'm seeing so. Some of these names will be, weird, but we got Max Rebo, Bib Fortuna, Jabba the Hutt, Admiral Akbar, the Rancor, Ula the Dancer, Sai Snoodles, uh, Bubo, the Road Creature, Effant Mon, Hermiodal, Nikto, Amanaman, just to name a few that all got accepted, and then there's a whole bunch of others as well. But when you say George liked your stuff, you're not kidding, because I don't think anybody comes close to the volume. As we've been identifying sculptors on the ones here.
Well, and he would do he would ask, "What is this guy?" And he would always do riffs on what we said. For Akbar, it was based on squid kind of a guy.
Right.
Yeah. I told him, "Oh, it's a calamari man." And so that's they were like the whatever they were.
Yeah, they ran with it.
and then for Salacious, we're a Mexican restaurant, and we were drinking beer and whatnot, just joking around, trying to come up with a name for the thing. And we were getting ready to go, and I had to tie up my tennis shoes. And I must have been like 3 sheets to the wind or something, because it was like I had trouble tying my tennis shoe. And I was saying, I can't tie my shoelacious. And it was like everyone went, "That's its name, shoelacious."
Shoelacious.
So George changed it into Salacious.
Which we did our replica of that with Tony McVeigh, and they're, in fact, while we're talking, they just are starting on another batch of 12 of those. So this whole studio gets filled up with Salacious every once in a while.
Yeah. That was a great thing that Tony came up with.
Yeah. And it is fascinating because it's such a popular character. And, as we're going through all the maquettes and the concept stuff, there's just nothing there because it just kind of came about along the way.
Well, it was something, in retrospect, it was one of the later characters that George said, Jabba needs a little friend. And I was kind of overwhelmed with just getting all the other stuff done. So Tony just took it and ran with it. And the first thing he did, George went for.
The one more I will ask about is the Ewok, because there is, at the archives, a really cool kind of caveman-looking Ewok that was one of your sculpts. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, well, in the script, they were supposed to be cannibals. and we weren't all, it was just kind of a throwaway line in the movie. But, we didn't like the teddy bears. None of us did. George, I guess with his marketing prowess and, want to interject cute things. But I didn't see it as cute. I did see it as a cannibal.
Yeah.
And like kind of a variation on like a proto-human or Neanderthal or,
yeah.
And, I like that design. I think it would have been a lot more cool.
It's a cool look. It is funny. You just, even as the teddy bears, you have to like remind people. It's like, well, they were gonna cook Harrison Ford there. Like they were gonna eat him. It's these are dangerous little bears.
Yeah, but they didn't look like they had the capability.
Yeah.
They exuded charm. Being threatening.
Yeah. No, yours definitely had a little more threat to it for sure. any of the designs in that, you're now, this is 40 years later, basically, to making all of those maquettes. I think there were 80 or so different designs made for these creatures. It seems like at least half of those actually even got made. Are there any that just jump out at you all this time later and that still resonate, that are just like, oh man, we nailed that one?
Well, I wasn't happy with a lot of them, in terms of, I wasn't really 100% thinking about how some of them would go together.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was one yellow thing, Banana Man.
Uh-huh.
That was like, the idea was good, but, yeah, it was very hard to manipulate on that stage.
I was going to say, yeah, there's not much you can do with a Banana Man there. He's got to basically stand against a wall and that's it, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so there were some of those things that, I didn't have any idea how to articulate them. But then, things like Max Rebo, I did. So.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've certainly covered a lot of ground. I thank you for all your time today. You can find Phil on social media. I'll have links in the description of the video, but don't miss the Mad Dreams and Monsters video, Mad Dreams and Monsters book, Mad God, which should be out in relatively soon if you're listening to this, which you'll be able to get, I assume, on Blu-ray and DVD and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's on Shudder, and I think they offer the first 30 days free, or at least they were.
Right.
So
that's hard to beat.
Yeah, if you don't want a horror collection, but I'm sure most of the people that would be driven to this would be horror fans.
Yeah.
And the Shudder originals are for the most part really good.
Yeah.
And the good ones are foreign films. And they are generally really intelligent and really creepy. And we just can't make horror films like that in this country. We just there's one way,
right?
And that's the highway. And these are really imaginative and kind of all over the map.
Yeah, things have become a bit formulaic in the horror department over in the States, it seems.
Exactly.
Well, if folks go up and enjoy Shudder, you can see Mad God there. I believe I saw something that in early December it's coming out on some kind of physical media. I know there's a lot of folks that still like to have that, and there's that. And but Phil, thank you once again.
Oh, hold it there. Let's wrap up with the story.
Sure.
A few months back, I get this letter, and it was from an English guy who has a 12-year-old daughter, Evelyn, that has the mental capacity of a 2-year-old. She's highly autistic, and she, didn't like to be touched. She would only eat for like 10 seconds at a time, and she's like bouncing all over the place.
Mm.
And the dad happened to have Mad God on, the Shudder, and for the first time in her life, she curled up and cuddled with him.
Oh my!
And Mad God was this, somehow I think that whatever level of, I'm like functionally autistic, and so I'm very much on the lower end of the spectrum, and to the point where it's really undetectable.
Mm.
But I think there was some wavelength there, that connected. So when she was in like another room, for eating, the sound would be on, and so she would eat. And then they were using it for, they had a therapy session. There were like little different colored cubes. They were hoping that she could match.
Mm-hmm.
She previously couldn't, but when the Score to Mad God was on, she could, put the blue blocks together and the red blocks together, and so on. So it's
Wow.
something very strange and mysterious. The grandparents, the poor family, have to watch Mad God
I was just gonna, yeah,
over again.
yeah.
Because the mom and dad and the grandparents, it's the first time in 12 years she could cuddle with.
Oh my goodness. That's absolutely incredible. And I do, it is funny because I just think about, my nieces and nephews and how many times their parents had to watch, Frozen or whatever Pixar movie or Minions movie they were into. And I'm just picturing that being Mad God now over and over again.
No, she didn't. She could care less about those.
That's amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's a wavelength, all right. Well, I thank you for that. I appreciate all of your time today and all the time of everybody who has been listening.
So there we go. We hope you guys enjoyed that chat. Once again, apologies for any of the audio quality there, but certainly hope it was worth a listen to you. If you are interested in any of the stuff we've been talking about, things like the Max Rebo Maquette, the Weequay over there, this Tauntaun, or the brand new Tauntaun bus that are behind me, go to regalrobot.com/Star Wars. You'll find all that stuff. And if you happen to be on the Regal Robot website, I would just say, if you like the sort of stuff we were talking about, you like the sort of stuff that we make, join our email newsletter. We don't send out a lot of email, but anytime we do something new, we always tell folks there, and that's the way to be in the know crowd and to get first shot at all of this stuff. So once again, thank you so much. Find us on social media. We're at Regal Robot everywhere, and be sure to like and subscribe, as kids say. Thanks. Take care.